Welcome back to Historical Arrow. In some of our previous videos on the Myanmar Civil War, we discussed the various factions and the current state of the conflict. However, many of you have asked for a quick explanation and summary of this war. This video is our response to those requests. First, as I mentioned in previous videos, this war didn't just start recently. It spans decades, dating back to the 19th century when Myanmar, like many other Asian countries, became a colony of an imperial power. Myanmar was under British rule. However, after World War II, when colonial powers like Britain and France were severely weakened, leader Aung San seized the opportunity. He assembled a military force to fight against British rule and won Myanmar's independence. This force grew stronger and eventually defeated the British invaders. Aung San became the first Prime Minister of Myanmar. Myanmar, however, is a very complex country with numerous ethnic groups coexisting. The key issue is that the largest ethnic group, the Bamar, makes up only 68% of the population, while other significant ethnic groups like the Wa, Shan, and Chinese also have large populations. Even after gaining independence, the nation was far from united. To give you an idea, currently, Myanmar has about 135 ethnic groups and 63 political parties running for parliament and local positions, with 40 of these parties deemed illegal by the current military government. In 1947, Aung San became the vice chairman of Burma's Executive Council, a transitional government. However, by July 1947, political rivals assassinated Aung San and many government members. On January 4, 1948, the country became an independent republic known as the Union of Burma, with Sao Shui Thaik as the first president and U Nu as the prime minister. Fortunately, before his death, Aung San left behind a legacy through his daughter, Aung San Suu Kyi, a significant figure in Myanmar's tumultuous history. Suu Kyi, a remarkable individual in her own right, had the advantage of studying abroad and, combined with her father's legacy, received overwhelming support from the people upon her return. Furthermore, the leaders who followed Aung San governed the country quite poorly. They lacked competence and were more focused on personal gain. As a result, corruption became rampant, crime spread, and the people were left in poverty. At this critical moment, in 1962, a military coup led by General Ne Win brought an end to the nation's democratic era. His military government then held power for the next 26 years. However, these 26 years were a disaster for Myanmar, as the country continued to stagnate under his poor policies. Here are the consequences of Ne Win's misguided policies. Instead of aligning clearly with either the US or the Soviet Union, Myanmar declared a unique path of its own, choosing isolationism. They believed there was no need for trade with other countries, so restrictive laws were enacted. This simultaneously aimed to prevent international interference. However, unlike North Korea, which fully isolated itself from the world, the Myanmar government implemented this policy only halfway. This half-hearted approach was the crux of the never-ending protests that ensued. Although international diplomacy was limited, the government did not impose a complete ban like North Korea. This led to a situation where many students, inspired by Western ideologies, took to the streets, demanding that the military government hold free elections, allowing the most capable and trusted individuals to lead the country. This was the moment when the name Aung San Suu Kyi rose to prominence, shining as a beacon representing the young intellectuals. The people flocked to her, offering their support, especially the student population, who were particularly passionate in their backing of Suu Kyi. They persisted in protesting, even in the face of military crackdowns that could have been 10 times harsher than Tiananmen or Wangdu, yet they continued to demand free elections. The military, unsure of how to handle the situation, arrested Suu Kyi and gave her two choices. The first option was to leave the country and live freely abroad, provided she promised never to return. The second option was to accept house arrest for the rest of her life. Naturally, Suu Kyi chose the second option. After that event, the protesters became even more enthusiastic, and the military government faced increasing pressure. While the military was preoccupied with the protests, various ethnic minorities, particularly in the Golden Triangle region, began demanding autonomy and independence. The most notable among them was Kun Sa. As I mentioned earlier, Myanmar is home to 135 different ethnic groups. These groups established political parties to represent their own interests. Despite their different motivations, both the protesters and these groups shared a common goal: to overthrow the military-led government and hold free elections. In 1988, the Myanmar military brutally suppressed protests against economic mismanagement and political oppression. On August 8, 1988, the military opened fire on protesters in what became known as the 8888 uprising. However, the protests of 1988 paved the way for a general election in 1990. Faced with immense pressure from multiple factions, the military was forced to compromise and hold elections in response to the people's demands. The outcome was clear. The military-backed party suffered a crushing defeat, and SUUKYI's National League for Democracy achieved a landslide victory. However, if the story had ended there, this video wouldn't exist. The military faction reneged on its promises, declaring the election fraudulent and refusing to accept the results. Naturally, protests erupted once again. Meanwhile, the separatist factions gained significant strength, fueled by profits from illicit drug trade and other illegal activities. Anti-government militias began to form more frequently, becoming increasingly organized and disciplined. Under mounting pressure, the military was forced to hold another election in 2010, and the surprising outcome was a sweeping victory for the military-backed party, which secured 80% of the vote. However, the public was skeptical, and protests erupted once again. Another election was held in 2015, with results announced on the morning of November 10, 2015. It was estimated that around 10,000 observers were present to monitor the election process in Myanmar. In the afternoon of November 10, 2015, leading the National League for Democracy, NLD, declared that her party had won about 75% of the seats in parliament, including 96 seats in total, 49 of which were in the lower house. The ruling Union Solidarity and Development Party, USDP, won only 3 seats in the lower house. However, the Myanmar military still retained significant political power. On March 30, 2016, Htin Kyaw, a close ally of Aung San Suu Kyi, officially became Myanmar's first civilian president in nearly 50 years, ending nearly 5 decades of military dictatorship. But if that were the end of it, we wouldn't have much more to discuss. In 2021, the military once again staged a coup to seize power, citing alleged foreign interference in the government. They promised to hold new elections within a year, but the people did not believe them. The ethnic minority parties also felt betrayed as they suddenly lost all their seats in parliament. From that point on, in addition to protests, sporadic conflicts and separatist warfare began as those opposing the military dictatorship started taking up arms, vowing to fight back instead of retreating and compromising as they had before. The resistance forces quickly aligned with multi-ethnic fighters with the goal of establishing what they called the National Unity Government, NUG, comprised of elected officials ousted by the coup. By the end of 2021, the situation in Myanmar had started to escalate. The resistance forces managed to maintain their positions in rural areas, but they faced significant challenges in capturing cities and towns, partly due to the heavy artillery and air force of the military government. By 2023, after 2 years of meticulous preparation, a force known as the Three Brothers Alliance, consisting of the Arakan Army, the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, MNDAA, and the Taung National Liberation Army, TNLA, launched Operation 1027, striking the government forces at multiple locations. The government forces, caught off guard by the sudden and direct assault, and weakened by the attrition they had faced since 2021, suffered continuous defeats on many fronts. By the end of 2023, both sides had reached a ceasefire agreement brokered by China. However, it only lasted for a month. Not only did the Three Brothers Alliance take advantage of the situation, but other insurgent groups also seized the opportunity to rise up in various regions with the goal of gaining autonomy for their territories. At this point, there are about 6 forces engaged in combat in Myanmar, including the Arakan Army, the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, MNDAA, the Taung National Liberation Army, TNLA, the Karen National Union, the Myanmar Government Forces, and the Kachin Independence Army. The situation has reached a stalemate, with the insurgent forces stuck at the gates of major cities. However, within just 2 continuous months, uprisings have spread to other states, with new forces gradually pushing the military to the brink of collapse. Currently, there are 18 major factions fighting against each other. Note that this number only includes the major factions. If we count the smaller factions, the total number rises to 31. As of now, according to the latest updates, 68 towns are under full control of the rebel forces. 2 states, Chin and Karenni, have declared independence and autonomy. The government currently controls only about 150 out of the 330 towns, with the rest being fiercely contested. It is estimated that around 3 million people in Myanmar have been displaced from their homes, with 240,000 fleeing to other countries. Approximately 53,000 people have been killed, and 29,000 have been arrested. Tens of thousands of civilian properties have been destroyed. There is no longer any safe place in Myanmar. Meanwhile, the true nature of the insurgent factions has become more apparent. Their goals are no longer to restore democracy and civilian governance as before 2021. Instead, these factions now aim to establish their own independent states in the territories they control. In the newly declared independent states and areas where the Myanmar military has been pushed back, the various rebel groups have turned on each other, fighting to seize as much territory as possible. Of course, there is also the influence of major international powers interfering in the situation. Country's food security crisis. The latest report from the United Nations, released in March 2024, states that up to 18.6 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian aid. Given the current situation, this number is likely to increase exponentially in the near future. This summary encapsulates the entire course of Myanmar's civil war from its independence to the present day. With the ongoing situation, the conflict is likely to continue for many years, possibly even decades, before it is resolved.